Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. And I hope you guys are having a great Monday and I appreciate you guys are here on the Monday morning. So, yeah, today's topic is about API ops, and we have our speaker, Marcel Medina, who is a lead developer at Datacom, and he is also a Microsoft MVP and a certified trainer, and who is going to be taking us through the API ops and how you can get started and how you can master it. So before you get started to the session, I just want to share the session is recorded. You don't need to record it on your side, and the recording will be provided in our YouTube channel. Secondly, there is a certificate of participation to those who stay till the end. Please make sure you climb it at the end if you're there, and we'll share a form where you can fill out the information to be getting it. So that's it from my side, and the stage is all to Marcel. Over to you.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Thanks, Surag, for the invite. Well, I would say welcome to the session where you're going to learn a little bit more about how to API ops works and how you can apply that in API deployment. I'm going to bring a little bit of introduction just to set up like a little bit of context, right? Technology is there like to enable us to do things, but before we get like to use that, I think I'm gonna just share with you what's the foundations for that, and then on this, let's say exercise, I'm gonna be sharing what we can do with API management on Azure and how API ops can help us with API deployment. I'm gonna just share my screen, Surag. So let me just share that and bring my slides in here. Just bear with me. In the meantime, on the chat, if you'd like to share a little bit about you, your experience or if you're just like learning or you're a student, just say something about you, and because then it helps me to drive a little bit of the conversations and even like the demos as well. So let me share my screen. Okay, nice. And so just giving like a little bit of introduction, right? So first time getting to share with you guys. So my name is Marcel Medina. I'm a software developer and Azure specialist. I'm also a playground enthusiast and coder. What I mean by that is that I have this website called Playgo Kids, which is it's it's a playground app that I created like with my family. So in general, we go to playground with our kids, and we decided to create an app for that. And my blog is on there, so on tech.playgokids.com. As you can see, I'm also a practice lead at Datacom. So I look after a team of developers, and in there, like we established good practices in software development. I have here like my QR codes if you want to get in touch with me. As you can see, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I have like Azure certifications. I'm also like a Microsoft MVP under the Azure category and also developer technologies. So I invite you to get in touch. Yeah, so the session just continues and we just get to connect for later sessions. One thing I would like to mention is that I'm also a community lead here in New Zealand. So we I have like the user group where called Coding Night, and we basically run sessions on Monday evenings here in New Zealand, which should be something late, I guess, like depending on the time zone. But yeah, that's why it's called Coding Nights, because we run those sessions at night. Here's a QR code if you want to get to know a little bit more about the user group. I invite you to connect. But as I can say, like it's a community group for of developers, and the sessions are aligned with developer interests. interest, right? So just get to learn a little bit more and get in touch. For the agenda today, I'm gonna bring, as I said, a little bit of context. So you're going to learn what's API ops. We're gonna see how to apply API ops to APIN, right? So API management on Azure and demo, right? I guess context and then going like through demos. I like demos, so but we need to establish like some context before. And to start, right? Um, so with API ops, uh, it didn't start like all of a sudden. So first DevOps, right? This whole sort of culture, it was created, right, to enable developers in IT operations to work together, right? So to be like a concise team, to work like in deliveries, right? I bring in here like a context, like a little bit of, uh, uh, I would say it's more like a definition of like what DevOps is. But as you can see, that's a methodology, right? So a systematic and a structured way of trying to solve like a particular problem. Methodology in the software development and IT industry. So use as a set of practices and tools, right? So when it says like practices and tools, so it's a combination of within the software development life cycle. What sort of practices do we have? Well, in general, we have like development, testing, right? So we have like this sort of iteration process where we validate and we fix, and we do that until it works for us. Like we have like a product that can be deployed, right? So and we have tooling for that. GitHub, Azure DevOps, GitLab. There are many tools, right? But the idea is that, like, so DevOps integrates and automates the work of software developers with the IT operations as a means for improving, shortening the development life cycle. I'm just bringing like this sort of known graph in here, where let me just bring my mouse in here. But as I said, like the set of practices in software development is that okay, we're gonna have like some sort of planning to define what we're going to create, and then after we have an idea of how what we're going to create, right, what sort of application, we're gonna go hands-on and with development. And after development, we are gonna have some check, right, test, unit test, integration test. But it's where like we verify if what was created, if that like works as expected. Considering that has passed, right? So we're going to be packaging the solution just to preparing that for a release that happens in here as a next action. Then we have some sort of configuration to establish like the environment or just productionize what we created and do some sort of monitoring to evaluate, check whether things are working or not as expected. In case of bugs, so we have like this sort of cycle that happens in here. So as you can notice, we have like the development team together with the operations team. In theory, it should be like a concise single team. In practice, what we see is that like in general, there are different teams, like developers and the infra team working together towards like this DevOps right culture. I just extract this one from well Wikipedia as for the context. Eh, but it's not only that, right? So DevOps kind of establish the foundations. For us to get to API ops, we need to understand also GitOps. Okay. Eh, here, like it's a definition of GitOps, but so it's a sort of a evolution from DevOps, but GitOps comes with an extra sort of layer on top of DevOps. But the idea here is that we have this sort of configuration, our source code, right? That what we create is version controlled. And GitOps comes because of Git, right? So which it's a very popular version control. And so GitOps was just like embedding the tooling onto DevOps, right? So where in here, let me bring like my laser again. Hopefully that comes. Here we go. Right, so where like for change the configuration, they can manage like through this code review practices, through PRs, right? So you create your code changes, you raise a PR, you have like this sort of review with like within the team. Once that's like okay, it gets merged, right? Eh, but what's the idea is that things can be rolled back using the version controlling, and essentially all the changes they are to the code, they are tracked, bookmarked, and making any update to the history that can be made like easier. So it's basically having control of what you are delivering. So when we combine that, um, we have like still some principles with GitOps, right? Because it's version controlled, but we have like more than that. So basically some principles with GitOps that your entire system is described declaratively. So you're basically leveraging configuration. Most of them uh, of what we are going to be doing with GitOps is through configuration. That's why it's declarative. In here we have the canonical desired state is versioned in Git, right? So whatever you are creating should be versioned, right? And as soon as changes are approved, they can be automatically applied. So it comes with like a tooling, right? So we have like these principles, but those principles can only be applied if the tooling supports that. In general, with like GitHub, Azure DevOps, you're going to have that. So you can establish GitOps principles by leveraging those tools. And another principle is that like the software agents, they continuously monitor the system state. So if there are PRs, if they get approved, they are automatically applied. And for any changes that happen, there should be like a pull request or some sort of automatic trigger that's going to start this operation, right? And with those software agents, they can verify whether the systems are in the correct state, right? Because people could perhaps to wake what's running. Not ideal, but like they depend on the platform that can allow you to do that. But you need to have some sort of mechanism to identify what happened and push back to a source control. So those are principles with GitOps. Also available like extract from Wikipedia. So as you can see, like well, DevOps, then we have like GitOps and what's API Ops. It is an evolution, right? So API Ops is going to be the combination of like these practices of DevOps with GitOps, right? To the API development lifecycle. It's specific to the API because when we look at software development lifecycle, we're looking at, well, first designing the architecture of the solution, right? While the API, you're not going to be establishing the architecture, but we're going to be defining some sort of what sort of requests and response you're going to be expecting. So there's like this design phase as well, right? And then with that, what sort of payloads, contract you're going to be leveraging. So you need to think about how to your API, is that going to be versioned? How you're going to establish versioning for that? So they're like different practices, right, under the API development lifecycle. But basically, what we end up is that okay, the same sort of graph around DevOps, but this sort of cycle in here, right? So we call like that. We have like continuous integration for the builds. And this continuous feedback as we monitor and verify whether the application, the API is working, right? So it combines things together. I'm not checking like actively the chat, but in case you guys have questions in here, just feel free to pop them like on the chat, and I'll check from time to time. Okay, let me just continue that. And with API ops on API management, right? So this is a standard sort of diagram that comes from the Microsoft architecture diagrams. But what you can see in here is that everything is version control, like so we have a Git repository. And what's going to be stored in here is basically schemas, right? Schemas that come from API management, could be API definitions, policies, any sort of API service information. They're like also logger and diagnostics, internals of how the API management service works. It's interesting that we basically are leveraging declarative um, objects, right? So through configuration. So we have XML, we have JSON files stored under the Git repo. And what's interesting here is that I have like some flows, but we could have API developers working together with API operators, which is basically that DevOps, right? So there are some flows in here I'm gonna show just to clarify how things will work like the same for both. It's just like where things start, really. So in general, what we're gonna have is that we have like these two pipelines, the extractor and the publisher pipeline. So the extractor is going to extract like the sort of schemas from API management. In here, I'm not sure like that's the schema is coming from here, but the idea is that the API developers, they could just trigger this pipeline that's going to pull everything that's in here. And before like the PR is created, what this pipeline does is that it verifies whether what we have on the Git repository is there or not. If it's not in there, it's going to create an APR. If it's in there, it simply is going to ignore. So basically, there is no need for you to change or raise a PR for no change. So, so the second step would be okay. So think there is a change. So the PR is going to be raised. And from there, right? So we could have like API developers creating more content. They could be working parallel, having like this multiple PRs to be consolidated in one approval or multiple approvals. So we're going to have API developers creating like more PRs, a technical lead or more senior developer, or even like a team would be reviewing those PRs and approving them. As soon as they like are approved, we have like the merge, and the merge should trigger the publishing pipeline automatically, right? That's one of those principles with GitOps. And by doing that, the pipeline, the publisher one, is going to publish not only to a single environment, but to a range of environments. For when we're talking about like production ready environments, we in general are going to end up with at least, I would say, three environments, right? A dev and a test instance and a production instance. Um, it depends on the client. You could have more. In general, at least three, right? Because you want to have one single environment for developers, one single environment for testers, and there could be also like business users as well. It depends on the client. In production, where things are not touched, everything is automated, right? There are clients where they have like UIT environments, so for user acceptance. So you can have like dev, test, UIT, and production. But the idea here with the publisher is that you're going to push to all the environments. Okay. We could have the operations team to also create schemas. They could do it like directly, like through on the Git repository. One thing that I'm not showing here is that the operators could also change things on an API management instance as well, because nothing stops you from modifying those schemas directly on Azure. So let's say if you have a critical bug and you need to apply some sort of hotfix or some sort of change, depending on what sort of changes are required, that could happen perhaps in here, like on this the API management, but that will need to be pulled back and source on code, right? But nothing stops like your operations team to do that. Same sort of process where they create PRs. There's an approval for that with the technical team, merging and publishing that. Okay. The initial step was this one. I guess like for me, I want like to show what API developers and operators can do. But it always starts in here. Like when you provision your API management instance, you're gonna do like through a bicep, right? Azure Bicep, Azure ARM template, or you could even do it like from I call like ClickOps, right? Or directly like on Azure. In general, you're going to automate things, but you're always going to start with a the out of the box, right, template for that. And then from there, you're going to remove things or add things. That's the same sort of process, right? So there's an extraction, PR, approval, and publishing. I'm going to approach in here like two sort of tools where we have Azure DevOps and GitHub. For the demo, I'm going to be demoing on Azure DevOps, but for GitHub, it's the same sort of process. One of the cool things is that Microsoft Azure team, the API management team, they provide those pipelines. So everything that's in there, it's baked in, right? So you don't need to customize or change things. You do it if you need to, like unless you have a very specific requirements, what they provide is pretty good. So it's going to fulfill most of the requirements. But I would like to share here the configuration settings for Azure DevOps and then GitHub. So for Azure DevOps, right, the configuration. Uh, for you to establish that, you need to go to a GitHub repository. And in there, for the API ops, you need to download the zip. It's called like under the release uh, tab on the GitHub. And there will be like one specific for DevOps, which is this one. As you get like the zip and you extract, you're gonna see that we have those YAML pipelines. They're ready to be used, really. They are available under like github.com/azure/APIOps/releases. Okay. One important thing on Azure DevOps is that before you can deploy, well, you need to establish the pipelines. But for the pipelines to be able to deploy to Azure, you need to create this service connection. So with the service connection is that how you connect to Azure behind the scenes. But first you need to establish that. There are multiple options, as you can see here. What's the recommended way is the workload identity federation. So basically it doesn't create a secret. Yeah, it's well, very well defined, different from a service principal or where you're gonna get like a secret for this one. It doesn't require that. Or the steps could be as smooth as that, as you click next, or you could face some sort of errors, right? Depending whether you have privileges on Azure or not. In general, if you are the owner of the Azure subscription, you shouldn't have any problems. But with working in IT and different companies, you need to act based on the sort of error messages. you're gonna get from there, right? So this is one of the areas that there could be multiple messages you could get, but it's all based on permissions. If you have the permissions, you can simply by clicks to get it to work. One of the things is that because the pipelines are going to be creating PRs, you need to define that your build service has permission to do that. So under the contributors group, right, you need to add the build service in there and allow it to create PRs. That's why it's in there. Depending on the environments, like it's recommended for production, you have an approval process, right? So things go in, like you can deploy to dev, test, but before production, you could have an approval process. And someone could just define, yeah, I'm happy for those changes to be pushed. So that's how you do it on Azure DevOps. Important variables are here defined, but you have API name, which is your API management instance. Well, version, resource groups, resource group names, and the service connection names. So they're like some sort of minimal sort of variables you need to configure. You can have more, but those are the basic ones you need to establish for the pipelines to work. And then we have GitHub. GitHub is similar. So they also provide a zip file for that. So it's github.zip. Azure Extract is exactly the same. So you have the same sort of YAML files, same sort of page in here under the releases page. But one of the things is that's different from Azure DevOps, where you have the service connections. For GitHub, you don't have that. So you need to run a command line. Here I'm using the Azure CLI, but what it does is that it defines this sort of, creates this um, service principal, which is basically what's doing that. Added the service principal, which with the permission of a contributor under this subscription, right? I need to do that for every single subscription or resource group in here. I have my dev, and here I have my production. So exactly the same commands, just changing those resource groups that are going to store like your API management. As soon as you do that, you get like the screenshots, this sort of output. It contains like the client ID, the secret, subscription ID, and the tenant ID. You need to use that to establish those variables on GitHub, right? So you have like on GitHub, you have like those environment variables. So you can see in there that those are the minimal sort of environment secret you need to establish, right? And one of the things with the GitHub is that because the build process is going to be creating APRs, you need to assign read and write permissions for it, right? So the GitHub actions should be able to create or approve like those pull requests. So that's something here. You go like under settings, actions, general, and you can allow that to do it. If you don't establish this, you're going to get like a warning. In the end, you're going to get to this screen, but if you are in a rush, knowing these steps are fundamental just to get it right. And now let's go like to demo, right? Because in here I introduced, like I know that it took like some time, but at least now we have established the foundations. And I'm gonna share my uh, Visual Studio Code, right, instance in here. And one of the things that I want to show is that, let me bring the other screen in here, right? So everything that I have shared, there is like this Azure APIOps, right? I'm gonna put like on the chat. There's a documentation for that. It can be a little bit like dense, but on this slide, I have consolidated them. But everything that I mentioned, those slides are here. So you shouldn't have like surprise, really. And currently we are on this version, right? Under the release, everything that I have shared on the slides, I'm gonna put like on the chat, so you have access to it. But currently, it's under the version 6.0.1.1. Right, so it's always going. So it's been like 2 weeks ago. So there's been like a lot of investments from Microsoft to do this to work, and yeah, they are putting like a yeah, full steam on that just to allow us to do more and more with APIOps. I have 2 instances of my API management. So as you can see here, like this is my APIOps ADO-dev, and I have my production. I'm just labeling this because for the sake like of the demos. And what I want to do is just to show like this case of, okay, I, I have pulled like those zip files. And when I do that, I have this sort of folder structure that comes with my repository. So if I bring this like in, I'm not gonna zoom in, otherwise I'm gonna lose here. But for example, right, this one. So in general, as I said, from the screenshots on the PowerPoint, what we get is this. Uh, we have like pipelines, YAML pipelines in here. And those are already established. I don't need to do much. Only if I have like specific requirements, I can change that. For now, you can see that I have those that are out of the box, what came up, but I have some additional YAML files. I have created that, but as you're gonna realize in here is that, okay, I have some sort of areas of configuration for what's called like API service name, named values, loggers, diagnostics, or internals, right? But I'm establishing variables for the development instance and for production, right? So I'm just saying that whatever happens in here, I could just have secrets or configuration related to my environments, because once PRs are created and I want to push to different environments, I may have like, let's say, diagnostics that are only applicable to dev. So I should have like on Azure, we have application sites. I could have like an application sites only for development, an application sites for test, for production. And those IDs are different. So they're internals, right? So application sites in here, you're gonna see that most of the things in here like are related to dev, right? So I'm just search for dev, but you're gonna see that they are kind of already established. If I look in here for production, right? So I'm basically changing resource groups, group names, but it's important that we have that difference. Otherwise, when we push on the pipeline and we don't have those variables, they're going to be using what we have extracted, right? Extraction, because we always do extraction, we tend to do from development, and we're going to get extracted schemas from development instances, right? So it's important to override that. Uh, Consider like the first extract, right? I have in here pipelines that I have run before. This one is called like API ops extractor, right? That's the one like we have like the publisher and the extractor. What I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna only show what I have in here. And let me just bring my other screen. This one. And what I want to do is that, okay, we have like this mocked version here, mocked API. Connectivity. Something's happening here. Let me see. Just bear with me. And I have like this mocked API. I think it was just like because I had this open for some time. But what it does is that, okay, I have like my instance, but I have also my Visual Studio code. And what I can do in here is that there's an extension on Azure where I can hook to API management. And I have like this one called extensions in here. So if I look like for API management, I think API management is going to be better. It's in here, right? So I have this extension, I have installed that, and it allows me to do it like a management of API management from my Visual Studio code, right? And what's interesting is that like I can come in here and see what's in there, like what sort of internals are available. So from that mock API, I have my V1s in here, I have my methods and policies. If I get to open that, right, you're gonna see that I have like some schemas in here. They're called like policies, but I have in here like a returns of 200. I have my Thunder client in here, which is basically just a HTTP request, HTTP client. And if I do this one here, I think that's the one. If I send that, you can see I can get like 200, okay? Because it's specified in here. Because I have direct access, I could say, okay, I want to save this to return like a 400. So it has like updated in here. And now I have like changed to 400. So this one should no longer be 200, should be 400, right? So, and that's what I got, right? So it's something that we can fully control that with like this extension. And from here, I could just create a PR going like straight to Azure DevOps. I have like done that before. And so for example, on my repo in here, I had like a pull request. And on this pull request, there was one like I abandoned because I didn't want to do like the changes. But as you can see here, right? So as soon as I did that, there was a change from 200 to 400, right? So that was a change. So this allows me to change things in here and extract that. So I could simply go like to my extract pipeline and do the extraction. It's going to pull everything, only the change, really, just the delta. And for that, I would have like only that particular change. And now I have changed that for 200, so I should get a 200, right? So it came back to that. So this tool is really powerful, right? So, well, I think like for us, like developers, it's good just for you to do it like on perhaps on the dev instance, but just be conscious that if you mess it up, those schemas, you're basically going to corrupt your API management instance, right? So be careful with that. My recommendation is that first you go and extract, right? The vanilla, let's say everything that's under the API. You do the first extraction, right? And as you do it, you're going to see that this one is not part of the zip file, okay? This APIN was the first extraction I have run, and it came up with like multiple schemas, APIs, diagnostics, groups, right? So you can have like loggers, which is like my application site, named values, products, versions. I have like specific version for that, V1, if you can remember here. But like what's important is that depending how you label your API management, this one was like APIOps, ADO, dev. Some internals would be labeled that, right? Dash dev. It's worth like for you on the first extraction to have a look on what's in there. I would say specifically with loggers, right? Because like application sites, you would create something like the specific for dev, something specific for test. What I noticed is that those hard-coded, or it's more like a label, right? Hard-coded label would come in here. you could end up in having something like application sites dash dev as a folder name. Okay, I would suggest for you to relabel or rename from source code if you see anything that's hard coded in terms of those objects in here, because those objects, they're going to be pushed to other environments. So you don't want to see any mention of dev or test in different environments. So just try to keep agnostic. And in general, you're going to see labels, right? It's not going to be a problem for release. It's just that rather than have application sites dash dev in dev dash production, you just have application sites. That's it. You just keep things agnostic. I think that's my recommendation. But as you can see, that's the structure that we have in there. Uh, the tooling is really powerful in here with the API management extension. Recommend you to have a look at that. What I want to do really is just to go on a scenario where, well, let's like do like API ops, like end to end. I think that's my intent in here. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create like this API. We're going to go like through this process of like creating a PR and pushing that to different environments. I know like we have like some few more minutes, but just bear with me. What I want to do really is just to import OpenAPI definition. I have created that beforehand, right? I have like this Swagger definition in here. And what I do have is just a to-do. A to-do sort of list that I have some hard-coded references, right? In general, like what I like doing, it's just like adding versioning to my APIs, right? What I'm gonna do is that one of the things in here, like I try avoiding that sort of like separation to do space app. To be honest, like I prefer having something like under lowercase, or we have something that uh, some sort of practice really that you established for all your APIs. So that's why I deleted that. I really don't like to see something like completely disconnected. Just follow a standard, I would say, right, for everything that you do. So in here, I'm gonna have like my to-do API. I'm gonna create a version. In here, I'm gonna see that the version is gonna say V1. Okay. Let me put in here. This one is going to be V1, right? And we're just going to create that as is. I don't need the original. My intent is that V1 is going to become the always to be used. And as you can see, I have like some methods in here. What's interesting to see is that for the API definition where I have description, it comes in here automatically. For the ones I didn't have, only the method names came up. All right, so it's good. There's like a step on the process of the extraction uh, where we validate whether the schemas, the Swagger definition is okay or not according to your standards. I could simply fail this once I do my PR, and I'm gonna show like that in the next step. But as you can see, there's a difference in here, right? So far, so good, but as you can see, for example, web service, this one was created on my local. I really don't have local hosts in there. I'm gonna save this, just remove. And, but what I want to do is to add a backend, because from there I can send like the request to a real service, okay? I'm gonna create this service in here first. And for this service, I have like a predefined URL for that. I'm gonna call this one an API to do backend. I have already a sample that I have provisioned before. I'm gonna be specifying, okay, that's my to-do sort of environment that's available for me as a backend. And I'm gonna create like that. And so I have my backend, but it's still not hooked up to my API. What I want to do is to make sure that this is hooked up. what I can do is that I can come in here and change my policy to include uh, that request, right, to my backend API. What I'm gonna do in here is just to include a tag. As you can see, this is the one that should be leveraged. Oops. Uh, that backend service. So with that, I have my backend API. It's interesting to see that for this one, it shows like internals. Uh, Not really necessary for this one. I'm gonna just remove, but this was part of my another templates. It works in some cases when you have Azure resource because it specifies a URL that's not really needed. But in here, for example, so I have already hooked this one to my backend in here. So in theory, I could make like the request, but like if I do that, one of the things I didn't show, but I could just try in here. So we have like this test tab, and I could do like this to do. And as soon as I do it, right, I'm gonna have a warning. It's more like an error. I'm gonna get like this 400. What it says in here is that there's a correlation. A correlation ID is required. I'm not providing that. And with that, I basically have this 400 request error, right? So I need to provide this correlation ID. How I'm gonna do it is through a policy. Uh, the way how this was created is that I need to add a correlation ID to as a header. And I'm going to include this correlation ID through a policy fragment. I have created an article some time ago showing how you could do that. I'm just put like on the chat. But like what I want to do is just to have like this sort of ready fragment where I can simply hook that to my policy, and that's going to resolve my request. Okay. I have like a name for that. I'm gonna call it correlation ID fragment. This one. But what it does, let me see if I can zoom in here. Right. So when the condition, when it contains the correlation ID, it does nothing. It just passes through. So if I provide, this is going to be passed to the backend. If it's not in there, then it's going to create a correlation ID. So that's what's doing it. It's creating and pushing to the backend because the backend requires that. Let me create this one. And this one now is available. I'm going to hook this under my policy. Okay. I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to add this now to my policy. And there is a specific um, fragment for that. It's this one. Okay, include fragment and calling my fragment that I have just created. Okay, I'm gonna save that. If I make the request now, so get that to do. So now, well, if you remember, right? So if I don't provide, it's going to create and push that to the backend. And it did that. Okay. So I got like this this 200 in here, which is pretty cool. So it's doing what's supposed to do it. And if I was to do like some sort of tracing, you would see that, wow, it's going through the policy in here. That's a really cool feature. So it shows that, okay, it's entering the policy, right? The expression was evaluated and the condition is false, right? So if it's false, it's going to create. So it created that. So that's really clever, right? So it created that. It set the header, right? And it sent back to the request to the backend. So cool, right? So that's working. However, I need now to make sure that this is going to work from my pipeline. What I'm going to do, I'm going to extract that. Okay. So I did this for my dev instance. I need to push to production. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to extract that. What's the name of my instance? So I'm going to grab some internals in here. Okay. What's the resource name? The resource group name is this one. My repository, well, I have created using the same sort of naming here. And as you could notice, what's the folder where it contains uh, my resources? So if you remember, well, I was like under the web, but I have my repository in here. It's called APIN, right? So APIN is the one that contains the artifact. So it's going to do the extraction, right? And I'm going to leave it running, but I'm going to show like one previous executions. So that's running. For example, in here, I have like some sort of warnings. One of those steps is that I here, for example, let me open that. You can see we have a spectral. Okay. So with spectral, it allows you to do linting to Swagger definitions. And there could be warnings in there, errors in there. And if that doesn't match like what your team definition is, you could simply, you can see some errors, right? So there are different errors from the OpenAPI definition that, well, there are like warnings, errors, warnings. You could just say, look, deny, right? Error. There is, if I bring like the code in here, you're gonna see that under the tools and the extractor, there is linter. Fail or continue on error in here, right? I could, this one, I could say false, but I'm skipping, really. I'm just allowing continue on error, just for the sake of the demo. But my team, I could specify no. If there is anything that doesn't match my spectral definition, block, right? So I'm not going to allow anything to go unless it follows like the standards I expect. So it did that. It's just running right now. And well, it just has run. There are like there are errors in there about okay, like fields that cannot be empty, all of that, right? In warnings as well. But one of the interesting things is that it should create the artifact. So the pull request. And as soon as it does that, I'm gonna have my repository. Okay, that's going to be created. Let me just see here. That was repository pull request. Okay, and I have that. So it extract everything that I did so far. However, right, that's only the dev definition, but I have a production for that. Okay, let me just bring this one for now to the ADO. That's my one, to the API ops. What I want to do is just, let me do a git pull for that. I want to check out the PR, okay? Git check out that. So I have switched my branch to the PR that's available in here. And right now I have like the latest from here. However, I don't have uh, the definition for one of the variables, the backend one. I don't have that. So as you can see, I don't have the backend. I want to specify that. And what I'm going to do in here very quickly, I know that we're getting to the time. I'm just going to go in here under diagnostics. Okay. And I'm going to include this backend. I have like a mapping for that. What's important to notice in here is that it's YAML, right? So we need to make sure you use spaces rather than tabs. If you use tabs, you're probably gonna get an error. So it's ideally, you can configure Visual Studio to do that, but it's important to be aware that, well, if you don't do it, you're gonna have like errors, face errors. I want to do this for, I'm gonna change, it's in production here, but let me go to production. Under diagnostics, I want to specify a variable because my backend should be for production. This one is for production. Let me just double check. Production. For the dev, okay, for the dev should be dev. So we're gonna change that. And to have this one, okay? Let me save this. Let me just double check, okay? I don't want to face an error. So I have like my resource group and my API in here. So, okay, I'm good now with the variable. I have created that. What I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna say variable update. Okay, I'm gonna commit and push that. Yes. And so my PR was created. I didn't have those variables. I created those variables. Now it has been pushed, right? My PR here now, it has identified the latest, which contains those dev changes in here, right? Meaning that I'm going to approve my PR. Okay, oh, if there was a team, there will be like approval and a merge to happen. So this merge is going to happen and it's going to automatically trigger the publishing pipeline. Okay, and with the publishing, it can take like a few, well, I'd say kind of 2 minutes or so, just for things just to happen. In the meantime, what I want like to show is that um, if you go like to the Visual Studio, I had like some other additional requests in here, right? So these my ADO dev tools, to-dos in here. Before I had executed that, I didn't have it, so that's why it was 404. Now, if I execute this one, right, for development environment that has been provisioned, if I look in here at the headers, remember, I'm not showing those secrets in here, but the correlation is not there. So it has created for me and push, and I got 200. But if I provide that, it's going to take it, okay? So this one is there. It's working. What I want to do now is that for production. Production, well, before that was 404. So I don't have it, right? So it should be 404 yet. So that's in there. I just want like this. So it has merged, it has deployed, is awaiting for me to push to production. Let me approve that, okay? And what's interesting is that, what's important is that, well, you don't skip environments. Even if you have changed the development instance, you go and push again, like to development. So you want to make sure that what you have done, like in my case, I was changing on code. So you want to validate whether that's working, right? We have done like just the test and we got 200. So do that for all the environments, dev, test, UIT, production. Push them all across, okay? And as soon as this finishes, right, I want, let's keep like this one side by side because I want to come and show this one, okay? So far we have, okay, so it's being provisioned, it's happening, okay? It has finished, okay? So I should get this one as a 200 if that works. And I got like a 200, okay? Which is pretty cool. Oops, pretty cool. I have like created that and I have the same instance exactly the same as my development environment, which is amazing. And before in here, like this, my production, I had loaded. I didn't have anything. Now, if I refresh, I should see the to-do V1 available and all the other, yeah, it's in here, right? V1. I should have my backends, right, which matches production here. So if you look, production, okay, my fragment. Nice. So we have in here everything required for us to be able to do API ops. Yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to share. And I hope that we make the time. I think like we are there now. Uh, do you have like questions? Let me just see here. Okay. To run in Docker. Uh, Law. No, we don't have that. If you're telling, like asking about the pipeline itself, uh, nope. It's just like it's a YAML file that runs on Azure DevOps directly, right? Even like for GitHub, you would have that. One of the things I didn't show is that I have my GitHub in here as well, and it's very similar, right? I have created exactly the same. We have like same sort of extractors in here. Like I didn't create for dev because dev always the dev variables. I didn't create for that because the dev is always going to be there, but I created for production. Artifacts are exactly the same, right? So you have like only YAML files that are going to be executed by your DevOps tool. I think that's our answer. That's Law. Any other questions? Feel free to ask. Yeah, I'm glad to answer. And if no other questions, then I just would like to thank you. And just to be in touch, really get to connect with the user group. And yeah, because we in general we have online sessions, so people well around the world, depending on time zones, if you can attend it, I think we always have like great content and we get to share with the community. Yeah, I think this is me, Surag, and
Thank you, Master.
thank you.
You can share your user group link in the chat box as well. Like if
Ah, yeah, let me
anybody,
put that. Yeah,
yeah, it's easier to get in than the presentation. So,
yeah, I agree.
um,
Yeah, let me put like this one. I just put it like on the chat.
so we share in the community as well. And yeah, thank you, Master, for joining the session today and taking the time to join us. I hope we'll see you again in the community. And thank you everyone for joining as well. We'll share the recording and the link to the certificate in the chat box. Thank you everyone. Thank you again, Master.
Thank you, Surag. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate the time. Cheers.